you had some really positive things to say about Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman. And I don't know, man, I like those guys so much and enjoy watching them already so much that it made me happy. That may sound silly. It made me happy when I saw what you had to write about each of them. Would you share that with us, your thoughts on those two guys, Gorman going into his third season, Walker going into his second season?
Yeah, Walker was somebody who I definitely think if you look at last year, you almost got to give him a pass for the first month or so he was on the roster. He was definitely rushed. I don't know if he was still coming back from the shoulder injury he had in spring training, but I just give him a pass for all of that. And just look at what he did after his recall. He was doing a better job getting the ball in the air. Not great. He still hits the ball on the ground a little too much, but driving the ball more, getting the ball in the air. His numbers were very good after the call-up. Still, we'll see what he turns out to be right fielder. He's putting a ton of work into becoming a better right fielder. Does that translate into becoming a good one? We'll have to see this year. I still think there's some potential he ends up at first base, especially with Goldschmidt being a free agent at the end of the year. We'll see how they manage the roster. But just from an offensive standpoint, you go back and players who have some similar traits. You look at Vladimir Guerrero, senior, dad. He broke out at 22. You look at Manny Ramirez. He had a big breakout at 22. Doesn't look as good in the books because it was a strike season, so it got cut short. But these are the type of hitters I think we're talking about with Walker. So I'm really excited to watch him this year. There could be. There's an upside here that you almost don't want to cap. Like, if you tell me Walker goes out and hits 310 with 45 doubles and 25 homers and becomes an average right fielder, I could absolutely see that. So, yeah, I'm excited to watch him this year. And then Gorman, I didn't do these rankings for fantasy, but I remember at the end of last year I was doing a 2024 mock draft. And it's taking Gorman in like the 6th round, and somebody was like, "Oh, really?" And I'm just like, "You've got that kind of power bat." Obviously, the second half wasn't as good as the first. Swing and miss is going to be an issue, but when you've got a second baseman who gets 35 home runs, draw enough walks to have a good OBP, the defense is what it is. I think Gorman is more a second baseman than Walker is a right fielder. But in both cases, you're talking about guys who are more hitters than fielders. I think you get away with that. We've talked about the interplay between the Cardinals pitching staff and their defense, and that's something certainly you wonder about. But I absolutely love Gorman coming into this year. And, it's funny, I think there are a lot of reasons to be excited about the Cardinals this year, and those are probably my two favorite.
The Cardinals, and it's sometimes you cover team, talk about them, write about them, like in my case, the Cardinals. Sometimes you're almost too close to see the bigger picture, but this sounds stupid, but I hadn't realized that how much they've overturned the roster in response to what happened last year. On their 40-man roster right now, I believe they have only 18 guys that were in place before the trade deadline last year, and they're still around. They have flipped more than half that 40-man roster, and a lot of it, Joe. Another chance to talk about Chaim Bloom, your former colleague and friend. A lot of it had to do with this very aggressive movement in terms of their bullpen, where they brought in 7, 8, 9 different relievers from outside the organization. He had a lot of influence on that. So there's been a lot of churn. There's been a lot of clearing out of dead branches. I don't know what it means, but I do appreciate their aggressiveness. By their standards, this has been a very aggressive offseason.
And not just offseason, but as you mentioned, it goes back to the trade deadline last year and trying to bring in a lot of arms. I think one of the problems the Cardinals had last year is when the top end of the bullpen kind of went sideways with Helsley. Helsley got hurt and was ineffective. You look at what they got out of Gallegos. They didn't have a lot of depth to back that up with. And you look at this bullpen this year, and there are 6 or 7 really live arms. They just recently brought in Keenan Middleton, who looked very good in camp the other day. You think about the bringing in Andrew Kittredge and the Rule 5 pick out of Boston. But even beyond that, Nate Robertson, who they also brought in from Boston in a trade. It was there's one other. I'm blanking on the name.
Riley O'Brien.
Riley O'Brien, thank you, the kid from Seattle. They've got depth to where it's not, well, we go into camp and we're stuck with these 5 guys. They can actually be in a situation where they can take the best, who looks the best, who impresses them the most, and know that they have depth at AAA as well. And even at the position player level, they've had that for a few years now. But we'll see if Matt Carpenter ends up knocking Alec Burleson back down to the minor leagues. We'll see if Luke and Baker makes the roster. I think on the position player side, they've got options too. So The one concern I have is the rotation.
Right.
It's a lot of older guys. We talk a lot about these free agent signings in the winter and talk about raising the floor. Like the bottom of this staff was really bad last year. The bottom of the rotation was. So they've raised the floor, but to me they've also capped their ceiling. Guys like Gray and Gibson and Lance Lynn don't have a lot of upside. You're not going to suddenly get a 2.6 ERA out of any of these guys. So they have kind of capped them. But the bullpen and the offense both have a fairly high ceiling. So, that's going to balance that out. You have upside here in the other elements of the thing, the other elements of the team. So, I'm seeing I don't know what you're saying, Bernie. I'm seeing a lot of people picking the Cardinals as the favorites of the division.
Oh,
I believe
absolutely.
The Vegas odds have that as well. I personally think higher are the Cubs. And I'm not, not radically so, but I'm still a couple weeks from doing my official picks, but I really like what the Cubs have built there. I think adding Counsell over David Ross is an underrated change for them. I think it's going to make a difference in the standings. But there's a separation now between these two teams and the rest of the division. The Brewers trading Corbin Burns. I believe you're their fifth starter this year. It might be Jim, but it's one of you guys are going to end up as the fifth starter in Milwaukee. I don't think the Reds are ready yet. I don't think the Pirates are ready yet. Like, this could be a classic Cubs-Cardinals pennant race as we get into July, August. I think, given that these two teams, it's been a few years now since both of these teams have been good at the same time, I'd be really excited to watch that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Joe, I want to correct myself because I transposed those numbers. I'm just going to do it this way. If you go back to before the trade deadline last season, the 40-man roster now, there's been a 45% change in the turnover of that 40-man roster. So, I mean, that's pretty significant. So we'll see. I'm looking forward to the season. I think they're a really intriguing team. They seem to be, pardon the cliche, but they seem to be really, really hungry. There's a lot of mad people in that clubhouse that were embarrassed, ashamed, just absolutely frustrated by what happened last year. And it is such a narrative, and I know that, but there seems to be an underlying determination to show that they're not going to have another disaster, that they're going to rise above that. So we'll see, because as you pointed out, they have a lot of things going well for them potentially in place, and it's a question whether the rotation will be what we think it can be, or whether they'll find a way to supplement it at some point during the season. But I think they've done a pretty good job overall. I wanted to ask you about the Cubs. Joe Sheehan is here. The stuff that Tom Ricketts, the chairman, the owner of the Cubs, said yesterday when pressed about Cody Bellinger, and I'm not going to read the quotes, but as I joked in something I wrote online, I said, it's like, wait a minute, he stole Bill DeWitt's playbook. And I'm not really ripping Bill DeWitt, but the Bill DeWitt message every year is like, listen, our goal all the time has been we want to compete. We want to have a chance to win every single year. We just want to make the playoffs, and we'll see, and then go from there. And I think people in St. Louis are a little tired of hearing that, even though their goals have largely been realized in that context. But yesterday, Ricketts was basically saying the same stuff. He was like holding up the Arizona Diamondbacks as like a motivation. Well, look at the Diamondbacks. See, if you just get it. And I'm like, wait a minute. I know the Cardinals can spend more money. I'm not taking them off the hook. But the Cubs can do whatever they want. I mean, the franchise value last year was $4.1 billion. They've got revenue sources all over the place. Now their model is the Arizona Diamondbacks. Surely this man must be jesting.
Anytime you can base your plan on a team that was outscored last year, you've got to do it. It's a complicated question, Bernie, because, we talk about this when we get into the playoffs every year, and any team good enough to make the playoffs is good enough to win the World Series. We saw that last year. It's hard for me to say, well, these teams should try to get to 98, 99, 100 wins, because that doesn't help you in the playoffs. There's just no difference between being a 100-win team in the playoffs and an 84-win team. So, the analyst part of me goes, Ricketts kind of has a point. Where it falls apart, though, is that the Diamondbacks can't be your model, because the Diamondbacks, again, they won 84 games, they squeaked into the playoffs, they were outscored, they weren't very good. You've got to at least be building a 90 to 95-win team. You've got to be building a team that's actually good, not a 500 team that gets lucky. And this is the frustration that, you've had with some of these owners this winter, most of these owners this winter, that have just stayed out of the top end of the free agent market. Look, I have my issues with Blake Snell and Cody Bellinger as talents, as, guys I might want to sign. But it's very strange that they're both still out there. I'm a little more confident in what Jordan Montgomery might bring to the table, what Matt Chapman might bring to the table, if necessarily, less risks, a little more certainty. All of these players can help a good team. And if you're in that 83 to 86 win range, which is roughly where both the Cardinals and Cubs sit today, that's where you get the most value of adding 2 or 3 wins in the free agent market. If you're the Nationals, you could sign all 4 of those guys. You're not going to the playoffs. If you're the Dodgers, well, you got no reason to sign all 4 of those guys because they're not going to help you get any further. But if you're in that 80, if you're projected to win 80 something games, that's where you get the most marginal value. So that's why some of these quotes that you mentioned, Ricketts, I want to say the Giants, Farhan Zaidi's made some comments to this effect.
Yep.
It's like, this is where those are the teams that absolutely should be signing free agents. And what they're doing now is falling back on the system. And I know this sounds, you're arrogant, I told you so, whatever. Analysts have said for years, the more teams you put in the playoffs, the less that teams are going to try to win. Because they're just going to try to get to 500 and get lucky, like the Diamondbacks did last year, like the Marlins did last year. And once you get lucky and get in the playoffs, anything can happen. Well, what that does is it reduces the value of players on the market. Why am I spending $30 million to sign Cody Bellinger for 3 extra wins when I can sign David Peralta for 1 extra win, and maybe I only need 1 extra win? So the more you expand the playoffs, and again, if you're putting 40% of the league into the playoffs, that means 60% of the league is kind of going to always have a chance in like June. You can be 55 and 57 and have a shot at the playoffs. You can be 45 and 57 and have a shot at the playoffs. You're NFLizing the baseball season. So it's complicated. I want to say go out and spend money and sign players, but the analyst part of me goes, for a lot of teams, it's actually not worth it because it can only make you a tiny, tiny little bit better in the playoffs.
Well, I've been sounding that horn a lot here on the show and also writing about it. Like, I can understand where Bill DeWitt is coming from. Do I wish they would pick their spots and be more aggressive? Like, for example, of course I do. Like, no one would disagree with that. But I also look at it. He's owned the team for 28 years. His average payroll over the last 28 years of ownership is the average annual payroll is a little over 10. Like, he's basically had a number 10 payroll on average since he's owned the team, and they've won a lot. I mean, they've won a lot. And so when I hear him, and John Mozeliak talk about, well, our goal is always to get to the playoffs, and I understand what they're saying. I even understood it back when it was really getting on my nerves. But this idea, like you just said, that you have to build a team that is going to win 95 in the regular season. I listen. The last 4 full seasons, the National League pennant winners average 88 wins, and that's only because the Nationals got 93 wins in the regular season in 2019. The last 3 regular season, the last 3 National League championships, the Braves, the Phillies, and the Diamondbacks,
none of them won 90. None of them won
have averaged 86.3 wins. So, I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, I can question some things, but should I really blast the Cardinals for this approach? Because the way they look at this is absolutely correct right now. And just me saying that now, we're going to get 20,000 text message blasting me. But I don't need Bill DeWitt to go nuts and throw money around like crazy. I need them to make good decisions and maybe, ratchet it up, special cases. This is the year maybe you should have gone out and got a second strong starter. That's a totally reasonable.
Still sitting there.
Yeah, I know, and I can't, but he won't do it because he's never done it, and it's just this is who he is. For the most part, it's worked out well, but we've also seen them, as you know, through the years. That's why I love what they've done with their bullpen this offseason, because my goodness, have the Cardinals thrown a lot of money away on expensive relievers. Brett Cecil, Greg Holland, even Andrew Miller, who's a great pitcher, but he was pretty much done by then. Luke Gregerson. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, 40, 50, $60 million on guys who were not collectively even worth one win above replacement during their times as Cardinals. So there's an outcry here, and because you've seen on Twitter. It's just they want him to spend, they want him to spend, they want him to spend. Just period. And I would just say, I don't need him to be stupid to impress me. I would just like to see him be more aggressive, but with that aggression also be smart. And you can do that. So anyway.
This has been the Cardinals. Again, I'm out of town stupid, so call me on this if you want. But my perception is that the Cardinals have never gone out and gotten, because as I said all the time, you got to shop at the top of the free agent market or at the bottom of it. The middle is where you get killed. Brett Cecil is where you get killed. So they didn't sign Scherzer. And you can look at guys throughout the last 10 years. They've gone out and traded for guys and extended them, and they get full credit for that. They've gone out and taken on the Nolan Arenado contract. They get full credit for that. I'm not saying, and that's what I'm saying. When you actually look at their payroll relative to market, you can't say the Cardinals are cheap. You just cannot say that. But they've just never gone out and signed the 1-5-wing guy who might have put them over the top. They've certainly produced them. They've traded for them. But I think this is the frustration of the fan base, where there's never been that moment in the winter. Everybody's happy about Sonny Gray. Great. Lane, Gibson, what have you. But I can't – I'm hard – Wilson Contreras is what? That's the biggest free agent contract for franchise history, right? $585?
Outside free agent, yep.
Right. They've never signed a guy for $100 million. They've never brought in Garrett Cole. I think that's where some of the frustration lays for fans. They've never had that off-season moment. And at this point, I think we can safely say they're not going to do that. It's just not how they're wired.
It isn't. And we've got, 28 seasons of payrolls to look at and moves that they've made to look at. That's his history. That's who he is. And, I understand. Listen, again, no one that I know is a baseball person or just even as a Cardinal fan thinks the idea of signing Jordan Montgomery stupid. No, I mean, of course it makes sense. Who would disagree with that? My thing is, my brain's wired so pragmatically. Having covered this franchise for 28 seasons, I realize, Bill DeWitt's just not going to do it. So I'm not going to bang my head against the wall, hoping that I make enough noise that he'll do it, because it's just not going to happen. Max Scherzer offered to sign with the Cardinals at a lower rate. Now, I'm not talking about a guy who's going to apply. He would have had to apply for public assistance. I'm not saying that. But he was willing to he was willing to give them the so-called hometown discount. It was going to be a lot of money, but it was going to be less money than it would have cost other teams, ultimately the Nationals. And the Cardinals took a pass. And it's the biggest mistake they've ever made during the Bill DeWitt years. There's no question about it. That thing was just sitting there. Max Scherzer was waiting and waiting and waiting because he wanted to pitch for his hometown team. And they just let him go. And I honestly, I still get kind of ticked off at that every time I talk about it.
Well, because when you look at how good the Cardinals were in those subsequent years, I want to say that was the 13-14 offseason. You look at how good the Cardinals were in the second half of the 2010s and where their weaknesses were. Like, you can make a case that Scherzer was the difference between winning a series in that time and not.
No doubt about it. You talked about the NL Central. I wanted to follow up. Joe Sheehan with us from the Joe Sheehan newsletter. I wanted to follow up, if I could, on the Cincinnati Reds. Now, just for our audience, because I spent time the last couple of days making sure I knew what everyone's done so far. I mean, they did sign a corner infielder, Candelario, 3 years, $45 million. Nick Martinez, pitcher, 2 years, $26 million. Frankie Montas, 1 year, $16 million. Two relievers, actually three relievers, the most prominent being Emilio Pagan, 2 years, $16 million. The question is, how much did those moves, how much did that affect the standings? In other words, you don't think it's enough. I understand where you're coming from, totally. But how much did these moves did they move the needle, if in fact they moved the needle?
A little. I mean, Nick Martinez. He was effective for the Padres. We still don't know if he can go a full season in the rotation. He kind of split his job there the last 2 years. So, maybe you get 20 starts out of him. Maybe spends part of the year in the bullpen. I think Emilio Pagan in Great American Ballpark, how old am I? That could just be a mistake. Pagan had a really weird year last year where, if you look at barrels, Bernie, barrels, the StatCast number, just hitting a ball real hard. And he had, on barrels, he only gave up a 700 slugging, which is an incredibly low number. That's going to regress this year. And I think the Reds are going to find themselves with a problem on their hands when you combine his fly-ball tendencies with that ballpark. So I don't think Pagan helps them at all. I don't think Candelario helps them. In fact, I think having Jeimer Candelario, career third baseman, he's played some first. They're talking about playing him at second. The problem is the Reds already have more infielders than they can get on the field. And I think having a veteran like Candelario around is going to make it more likely that they make mistakes with those other infielders. You can ruin young players by jerking them around constantly. And I just don't like the possibility. Like he bumps Christian Encarnacion Strand, or, he plays third base. So Ellie De La Cruz doesn't play that day, or Matt McClain doesn't play that day, or Spencer Steer, or any of the other infielders. Nothing Marte doesn't play that. They have all of these good young infielders. They're like the National League version of the Orioles. So I really hate that move. And to me, I hate what it says about them, which is they wanted to make a move that kind of brought in a veteran. Yes, we're spending money, but it doesn't fit what they have on the field. That move alone really set me back on their entire offseason. Honestly, though, Candelario, Martinez, Pagan, all these, Montas, none of that's going to determine their season. Their season is going to be determined by do Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo and Graham Ashcraft and Andrew Abbott all stay healthy and in the rotation? Does Ellie De La Cruz take a step forward? Does TJ Fredo repeat his breakout year last year? It's going to be about the young homegrown talent or home traded for talent in the case of Marte, as opposed to any of the free agents they've signed. So I can get nitpicky about all these moves, but it's going to be, does David Bell get the most and the healthiest performances out of the incredible crop of young talent they have?
Joe Sheehan with us from the Joe Sheehan newsletter. Please consider subscribing. But if you want to have a free look, literally once a week, one of the columns that he does write for subscribers will just show up in your inbox. And Joe, one more time.
Tomorrow. So if you sign up today, you'll get something tomorrow.
FreeSheehanNewsletter.com. Free Sheehan Newsletter. At gmail.com. Yeah, I'm sorry, I screwed that up.
Let me also, Bernie, folks, if you want to just go to JoeSheehan.com, there's a link there. JoeSheehan.com. Sign up there through there's a link right on the front page. Send me an email. You'll literally get something tomorrow about the most interesting camps, Red Sox, Nationals, a handful of others.
I can't wait to read. That's great. So take advantage of this. You'll bring a little Joe Sheehan into your life. You'll enjoy it. Joe, until next time, thank you so much, man, and great talking to you. And one of these nights, I'm going to hop on your Slack channel. I keep saying that. Dane Perry. I owe Dane Perry a Slack visit, I think. All right, you take care, man. That's our friend Joe Sheehan. And again, I'm having one of those days because I didn't work yesterday as far as the radio, and the words are just coming out all funky today. I don't know why. It's not because of alcohol or anything like that. Maybe I slept too long. Maybe that's what it is. But anyway, go to FreeSheehanNewsletter@gmail.com. Take a free look. I put something on Twitter the other day about that, and Joe got a lot of action out of it. So as far as people signing up to read the free copy once a week, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. You'll enjoy it.